Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Thanks for joining us. I am Lindsay. Let's go inside Utah politics. Changes to the judiciary remain a top priority on Capitol Hill this week. It comes as the State Bar Association says lawmakers are moving too fast in the days after Governor Spencer Cox signed Supreme Court expansion into law. Now we're seeing tweaks to the plans to create a specialized constitutional panel in Utah. I sat down with a sponsor of that bill to talk about where court reform goes next. Representative MacPherson, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
Okay, let's dive into this constitutional court concept because this is something that's kind of blowing the minds of people here on Utah's Capitol Hill. What is the need for this 3-judge panel to come in and sort of take over cases that are a civil action, a law passed by the legislature that may violate the Constitution? Why do you see the need to go to this special panel of judges?
Sure. Thanks for the question, and I'm happy to be here to discuss this. And I'm sure you saw that the bill has changed quite a bit since it was first introduced and has now passed the House. So the primary reason why this really started is we have a concern when it comes to, the people have a chance to elect representatives and senators all across the state. They generally are closer to the people. They go through this process of designing and drafting bills, working with stakeholders, going through this incredibly difficult process, sometimes public comment, public scrutiny, like we're doing here. And then eventually you get a vote, an up or down, you pass through committees, you pass through floors, and eventually you get signed by the governor and you get enacted into law. It's a pretty difficult process. And then we have a check where the judiciary steps in, and they can put sometimes those laws on hold, they can enjoin them. And that's part of the process as intended and as designed. But there have been, over the last several years, a lot of these cases that have come up where these holds have now been going on for years and years and years at a time. And there's some concern, depending on the districts they're filed in, there's perhaps some concern about shopping particular districts for certain cases, and the fact that certain cases get bogged down in certain areas, that perhaps we can sort of eliminate a lot of the trust issues that have been building between both the legislature and the judiciary and the people generally by removing these to more of a random court selection. So that it can't be really sort of this shopping that can go on from either party, really.
Well, let me push you a little bit there, because you're saying that these groups, like take redistricting, for example, you're saying they come in and file in a court like the 3rd District in Salt Lake County, where perhaps they're more favorable judges to their outcome, but now you're creating a court where there are a 3-panel of judges hoping to get more judges favorable to your outcome. How are you guys not doing the same thing that you're criticizing?
Yeah, and I would say that obviously our initial run on this was to create a court. And that's only because that was our constraint under the Constitution. There are a couple of states that follow this exact same pattern, but their constitutions are more forgiving, let's say. They give more power to the legislature when it comes to organizing courts. Utah's constitution doesn't give us that power.
Yeah, and let me be clear, I know it's a panel.
Sure.
Right, I might be using the word court.
Yeah,
right.
We're not establishing a court in any way. So what this does is essentially says that if a case is filed and it's seeking as a remedy to enjoin a state law, then there is an opportunity for the state to step in and say, in this instance, it's best if it's heard by a random selection of 3 judges, rather than any one judge to review this. The remedies stay the same, the legal process stays the same. We're just saying instead of 1 set of eyes, let's put 3 sets of eyes on this that are going to be randomly selected from the existing judiciary. We're not adding any new judges to this. We're not identifying particularly. In fact, we're allowing the Judicial Council to tell us which judges qualify and to create a random selection process. We have no part of the process when it comes to identifying who can serve on those or who might be selected.
Right, but you're changing the process of who can hear these cases.
Well, any judge can hear it if they were selected on the panel, but the Judicial Council decides who's eligible to serve on that panel and how the random selection works.
Right, but how does it not, again, do court shopping on your side, where you're taking the judges that wouldn't otherwise be assigned and getting them on this case?
We could get any judge assigned. I mean, if the Judicial Council puts any judge that that you might think that we were trying to avoid in the pool, that is their prerogative. And if that judge comes up in the pool, then they will hear the case, just like they would in the current selection process. But instead of just being one, there'll be three.
So the other thing this bill does is allow the governor, the legislature, the attorney general to file a motion basically to say we want our case, if we're a litigant and in the case someone's challenging the laws that we passed as a state, to be able to be heard by this panel. Why is that a good idea? Because again, the perception may be that these three will always be Republican, at least in our Republican stronghold state, and they can take, you know, a case again out of a trial court where it may have otherwise been assigned and give it to this panel of statewide judges.
I think this is important to understand too. So we have currently right now in law, we have the ability to do a preemptory challenge of judges. So in those instances, right now as it currently stands, if you get a judge and you don't feel like this judge is favorable, if you feel like you have some personal history or something, both sides of the case have a preemptory challenge that they can kind of do a one-time, I don't want this judge. And they have to go back and assign a new judge to them. So this concept isn't necessarily new. But again, I go back to the core principle. This is a random selection of judges. There's not really, in fact, that's part of the point of the random selection and the way that the Judicial Council creates the eligibility, that the state will have no ability to put any thumb on a scale to say, we want these judges there, because the courts will have created that process by which they assign judges to these cases. And again, the remedies stay the same. And when you go to that earlier question, why is it a good idea for the AG or the legislature or the governor? Well, the state has an interest. We've gone, again, through the process that I mentioned to pass a law. So the legislature has an interest in defending its laws, as does the governor, who typically signed them. And the AG is obviously the attorney for the state, who would most likely represent the state in those. So that seemed to be the best way. And this is a notice that you file with the court. They look at the statute that says, in these particular cases where you're seeking as a remedy to enjoin a law, they are going to be transferred to a panel. And then it's up to the courts to decide which judges get assigned.
You, at the time of the redistricting ruling, led the charge on impeachment of Judge Diana Gibson. Do you still believe she should be impeached?
So there's a question of, and I guess this goes back to a fundamental question, is what is impeachment for? Impeachment's a political process. It's not a legal process. There's a lot of conversation about, you know, what has any judge done? I think there are process problems in many of our cases with many of our judges. I think that this is a tool that is exclusively given to the legislature that the state has never exercised ever and since it's been a state. I do think that it has, that some of the concerns that the legislature has with the judiciary stems from the fact that there are checks and balances that exist, but sometimes we don't use them. So whether we're talking about a particular judge or more about the judiciary and the process of impeachment, I do think that that is a tool that is necessary and should be used to help restore public trust when it comes to these sort of conversations. So
should it be used in the redistricting case? Yes.
That comes down to the body of the to be fair, of the House. The House has the power to impeach. And if there are the will and the votes to do so, then I imagine we would. And that may come down to a timing issue too. There was a lot of outcry from media and from the public about whether this was seeking to try to change the outcome, which impeachment couldn't change the outcome, or whether we were trying to interfere with the case. The case is still ongoing. So perhaps it's a timing issue. I'm not ready to close that door. I don't think many others are. But it's certainly not something we're focusing on right now. Right now, we're trying to focus on how do we fix this process so that Utahns can feel comfortable knowing that these cases are being heard in a venue, that there's multiple eyes on them, that there's not some sort of shopping going on, either from one party in the case or from the state, and they can feel comfortable knowing that there's the judicial process when it comes to reviewing these for constitutionality, and that nobody has their thumb on the scale.
We'll have to leave it there for today. Representative Matt MacPherson, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
For coming to explain your bill. We appreciate it. Well, my thanks again to Representative MacPherson there. Still ahead on Inside Utah Politics, Utah State University rebuilding relationships on Capitol Hill, how the president of USU is reacting to a scathing audit. He joins us when we come back.
You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
President Brad Mortensen, thanks for joining me.
Yes, it's great to be with you, Lindsay.
Less than 100 days into your new gig as president of Utah State University. How are things?
You know, it's great to be back at USU. I'm an Aggie. I went to school there, and so it's fun to be back in Cache Valley, walk down those same hallways and sidewalks I did as a student now in this role. But there's a lot of work to do too, and the legislative session has really accelerated that, and we're trying to restore the trust of Utah State with our state legislators.
Yeah, we got to dive into the elephant in the room, which is this scathing audit that came out, essentially past presidents misusing taxpayer funds. I re-listened to the audit committee again this morning and thinking about $12 million that the past president reportedly cost the university because of procurement issues. How do you make up that money?
You know, these are all things where and that happened over a number of years, actually, and that was, something that should have probably gone out to bid, didn't. And there were just some concerns. Really, the auditors were not wrong in the findings that they had, and so we know that we have to be good stewards of taxpayer money, and it's fair for legislators and others to oversee and critique that. So what we're doing is adjusting our policies, committing to doing things the right way. We had policies in place that should have prevented things like that, but they weren't followed, and so we just have to, make sure we have the right people in place and the right commitment from the top down to everybody else at USU that we're going to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars.
In an email from the state auditors that I got today, they told me they have not referred Elizabeth Cantwell for possible criminal charges because of these procurement issues that you're talking about. Do you believe she should be charged?
That's really up to the legal folks. My focus is really on, what are we going to do going forward? Are there any things that we can retroactively look at to correct? But we won't really be a party to those decisions that prosecutors or other legal authorities make.
Do you know if charges have been referred?
I haven't been in any conversations about that.
Okay. This audit was really a wake-up call on leadership, it sounds like. How are you bridging the gap between the Board of Trustees, your office, the students, the faculty? What is the game plan?
There was a sense that there wasn't transparency in the decision making from all of those groups, including the community and alumni. There were a lot of folks who felt like things were done behind closed doors and there wasn't involvement. So I honestly think that's why I ended up in this role after being at Weber State for so long, and hopefully having a reputation for being able to have an open door, be transparent in the decision making, and so we just have to do that. But it's not something that I expect will be restored on day 1 or day 100, but hopefully we can keep working away on it through day 1000 and beyond. And I found little things on campus are going a long way right now. The president's office had been locked down so that people couldn't stop by or come in, or so we've unlocked that.
Can we go see the bidet?
I have shown other people from the media the bidet. So if you're ever in Cache Valley, back at your alma mater, I'm happy to show you that. We use the golf cart to give students a ride to finals.
Right.
So trying to, not really make light, but to demonstrate that we don't have anything to hide, and we're gonna, try to make solid bridges going forward.
For those catching up, those were some of the things that the past president used some funding for that she maybe shouldn't have, just some lavish things in the office, which now you're sort of benefiting from.
I guess you could say that.
Are you a bidet guy? I mean.
That's probably too much information for our Inside Utah Politics viewers.
That was an unfair question. Okay, so when you walk around campus or you golf cart around campus and you try to give people a ride there, what is the culture like on campus right now? Do students, like when I was in college, I had no idea what the president was up to. Do students recognize what's going on?
Honestly, I'm surprised how much students have kind of said, because I don't ride the golf cart across campus. I walk just to be a little more visible. And I spend a lot of time at the Capitol or other meetings, so I'm not always there. But was serving some pancakes with student government leaders a couple days ago, And it surprised me how many students have said, it's so nice to see you, our president, around, to see you engaged on campus, to know that you want to be here, that you were a student like us once. And so really trying to build that connection with our students is one of my priorities right now, because I think that's how we can build the trust with all of our stakeholders going forward.
And how do you reassure alumni, in particular the donating alumni? I mean,
Right.
that's where a lot of the money comes from.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of conversations there, and there are some folks who are who've said, okay, well, we appreciate you're trying to change things, but we're gonna, watch for a while and see that there's a track record there, which I respect. I would probably do the same thing if I was in their shoes, but really making those connections and contacts and trying to show people that we are turning a new page at Utah State. And there's just so many great things and so many great people doing amazing work at the university, faculty, staff, students, that benefits the community. It's kind of been under this cloud while this controversy is happening, and we're trying to just move on so that the great folks there can shine.
Can you give me a concrete example of one of the changes you've had to make just in your first 100 days?
So just even before I started, the Board of Trustees adopted a new policy about the President's Office budget and expenditures. And so now I've taken a budget to them that they've approved for this current fiscal year. We report on that to them quarterly. If their expenditures over a certain dollar threshold, I have to, kind of not really get permission, but share that
Run
with
it
them
by
in
them.
advance.
Yeah.
And so we've been doing that in these first 3 months, and I welcome that because it demonstrates that we are turning the page. And our Board of Trustees have really stepped up and shown a lot of leadership here. They care a great deal for the university, and they want it to be successful.
What do you want students to know as you move out of, like you're saying, trying to kind of get out from under this cloud?
Yeah, so the first thing I always tell students is that they have more potential than they realize, and that they just need to jump into this experience and build it up. But that the university is going to be there. We're there for the students, and we're going to support them and use their tuition dollars wisely to give them the best experiences we can.
One of the things the audit found too was that these programs that you have, these degrees you have, aren't keeping up with student enrollment. So you've got a ton of kids in these like engineering classes, for example, but not enough faculty.
Yeah.
That's got to be tough for students to hear when I'm going to college for this degree and I'm not getting the education I'm paying for.
Yeah, we're one thing that we'll be doing behind the scenes is updating our budget model so that it will better put resources in the areas where students have a lot of demand, where there's workforce demand in the future, and so that will get those resources to the right places. So, we have had students who have felt pinched in trying to pursue their degree because the options aren't there now, not just in Logan, but across our statewide campuses, which we have 8 statewide campuses and 30 centers across the state. So there's a lot of impact that Utah State has the potential to have, that we don't need to be distracted by these other things. We need to keep our eye on that ball.
Will you do more hiring, more faculty?
Through the reinvestment plan that we did with the legislature last year, once we get our money back and are showing that we are meeting the objectives of the audit, we do have a number of faculty hires planned in high demand areas, everything from healthcare to a vet tech program in Blanding and other things that we're excited to move forward on that will meet some of those student needs.
You mentioned the funding that was taken because of the higher ed reallocation process that higher ed went through last legislative session. Do you anticipate getting that money back soon?
So at this point, we're optimistic that the way the legislators have received our response to the audit seems fairly positive. And so we're hopeful we'll be working with them throughout the remaining legislative session days to go back before the Executive Appropriations Committee and get them to send us that outstanding $8.8 million that they're holding on to make sure that we take the audit seriously.
We will have to leave it there. President Brad Mortensen of Utah State, thanks for your time.
Thanks so much,
We
Lindsay.
appreciate it. My thanks to USU's president there. Coming up still, Utah's federal delegation joins the redistricting fight. Why Congresswoman Celeste Malloy says Prop 4 could go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court.
You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
Representative Celeste Malloy joins the dozens of lawmakers suing the state over its new congressional lines. The case, filed in federal court, now asks whether the U.S. Constitution provides for anyone outside of the legislature to draw Utah's congressional lines. I caught the Congresswoman for a quick Zoom call to understand where the case is going after years in the state court system. Congresswoman Celeste Malloy, talk to me about why you joined this lawsuit.
Because it's important that Utahns have a voice in how our congressional maps are drawn. The United States Constitution and the Utah State Constitution both say that the legislature is supposed to draw the maps. And even the independent commission that was created by Prop 4 submitted maps to the state legislature. But what we have right now is a map that was not created by the legislature or by the independent commission. And this is one of the remedies that we have that we've got to exercise to make sure that we're having a good process for drawing maps.
But what happens when the state legislature draws a map but violates what the citizens had implemented when they drew that map? Is this not a legal remedy for what happens when the legislature violates the law?
If there's something wrong with the legislature's maps, then the remedy would be sending it back to the legislature, not selecting a map that was drawn by a plaintiff in a lawsuit with no input from the public. So the legislature, when they do their maps, they hold public hearings, they talk to the elected officials, they live in communities all over the state. They represent the whole state collectively as a body. But when a map is drawn by a plaintiff in a lawsuit, they don't have that same buy-in, they don't have the public process. And I want to make sure that we have a public process where Utah voters are part of deciding how these maps are drawn.
Has the the U.S. Supreme Court not already settled this issue with the independent state legislatures theory, where time, place, and manner, the states get to decide how they run elections, not just saying it's the legislature, period, full stop?
So the Constitution says that states decide time, place, and manner. It also says that the legislatures draw maps, and our state constitution specifically says that legislatures draw maps. And having an independent commission isn't incompatible with that, but what happened here didn't follow either of those routes.
How did this joining of the lawsuit come to be? How did you get involved? Who talked to who? Why did you decide to join it?
I decided to join after several conversations with other elected officials. You'll notice that the lawsuit has a dozen plaintiffs on it. I'm one of them. We felt like as a collective body, we spoke for a lot of different groups in Utah. And we wanted to make sure that on behalf of all the people who can't go out and file a lawsuit, that we were making sure that their voices are heard. And we made sure that we published an opinion piece in the Deseret News right when the lawsuit got filed to make it clear to everybody why we're doing it. If you haven't read the op-ed, I would really encourage people to go read the op-ed, make sure they understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, because it's really a very thoughtful approach.
Right. And I hear you that you're saying that, you know, the Constitution provides for the legislature to draw the lines, but Utah's Constitution also provides for the people to have a right to alter and reform their government. What does that clause mean to you if it's the legislature who draws the lines here?
So what that means is that in general, the people have an equal amount of authority with the legislature when it comes to how the government's run. That's in Clause 6. Clause 9 is specific and specifically says that the legislature draws congressional maps, and the specific governs the general when you're interpreting Constitution.
Okay, so you're saying...
Sorry, this has to be a question.
Okay. Was there any coordination with the legislature to file this lawsuit?
The legislature's going through their own process with the state Supreme Court, so we did this independently of the legislature.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Representative, thanks for your time. Well, that does it for today's Inside Utah Politics. Stay in touch with us on social media, won't you? You can find me on X, Threads, Instagram, Lindsay on Air, Lindsay spelled with an A. You can also find Inside Utah Politics in podcast form wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want more national politics, make sure you check out our national political coverage. Our political power ranker, our next star national political director and the head of Emerson College polling, look at who's up and who's down in the world of politics based on the data. We carry that for you and a lot more analysis on our free streaming app, News for Utah Plus. You can download that on Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and newer Samsung TVs. Well, thanks for joining us this week. We will see you next week.